Joined by Dr. Patrick Doran, the Director of Conservation at the Nature Conservancy.
Yep.
Good to see you. Gary, you're back again.
Yes,
Seems
I
like
am.
every time I'm over here, you're here again.
Well, I'm happy to be back in Cleveland, Rick.
It's good to see you again. But you are a journalist, and you've been invaluable in helping us to understand what's going on here. And really, Patrick, I wanted to start with you. As we were watching the Asian Carp Conference, you were saying that it's great that we have all of these pieces here, but it seems like sometimes we're not quite meshing.
Yeah, I think we have the right interests, the right kinds of stakeholders at these panels, right? We have the scientific perspective, we have a management perspective, we have some of the stakeholders that be influenced by the problem. But I think where we need to get to next, I think we're all in the right place, we need to get to next is that integration of those ideas. What's our holistic strategy for aquatic invasive species, from prevention up front to early detection, rapid response when they get here, when they're at the doorstep, to how we're going to manage things when they do get here.
It's more than just the one fish species. We talk about the Asian carp or the big head carp, but there's a lot more that's really pressuring the lakes.
Exactly. I mean, this has been going on for a century. Invasions to the Great Lakes that have influenced or negatively impact the various values that we all get from these lakes, and it's going to be an issue for centuries to come. It will always be an issue. How we deal with it, again, it's only partially an Asian carp question right now. It's an aquatic invasive species question. It'll be something different tomorrow. It'll be something different the day after that.
And just to pick up on what Patrick was saying, Rick, I was watching the carp panel just before we came back on the air, and some of those arguments and some of the positions by the participants, it could easily have been last year's discussion. Everybody's got their entrenched position. Everybody's respectful of everybody else, but there is no integration, at least not right now. And I don't think there's going to be until 2013 when the Army Corps releases its report and makes its report to Congress. And then things will start to happen.
Fair to say, right now we're treading water.
Treading water, yes.
Everybody wants everybody else to be the one who makes the compromise.
Exactly, yeah.
So where would you like to see it go before, we still have time until we get to 2013, until we see the hard numbers. What should we be doing in the meantime?
We've got to be getting everybody from every state, every province, every different kind of sector of society that's a stakeholder in this issue. We have to get them all on the same page and be ready. There needs to be agreement. We can't have a weak link geographically. One state has weaker rules, regulations, voluntary standards than another. We can't have one stakeholder group different than another. We all need to be in agreement and have some type of multi-sector, multi-stakeholder, multi-state agreement on how we're going to attack prevention up front, early detection, rapid response when things are at the doorstep, and management when things are going to get here.
What would you like to see in terms of a bigger picture of the Conservancy picture we bring in to talk about what needs to be saved? It's not just the water, though. We think about the land. We were looking at agriculture this morning, and so much of what happens on the land impacts the water, and sometimes vice versa.
One thing that I really talk about, Gary and I had chatted before, kind of about this continuum of conservation, this continuity of conservation. First, the first thing we do is what do we care about? What are the values that I come from a biodiversity organization. I'm focused on biodiversity, not solely, but that's my perspective. We have other folks that come in from a power generation or water use. Middle is here today talking about their use of the water as a transportation mechanism, also the use in the production of products for various industries. We all get certain values. We have to start there. And then we have to ask the question, well, what's a threat to those values? What's endangering or threatening those values? Is it invasive species? Sometimes, yeah, it is. Is it beach health, and there is an agricultural link to algal blooms to our recreational values. And then we got to get to the strategies. Okay, what are we going to do about that? I had a friend that listened to some of this morning's science discussion, and this friend left the room. She's like, well, what are we going to do? And that person didn't discuss that. Well, maybe a couple people down the talk were going to discuss it, but we have to be clear. We have to make those links between what do we care about and what are we going to do to make sure it's conserved, protected, sustainable.
And as we strengthen one area, we have to be cautious not to weaken other areas along the chain, because those people they revolt.
Yeah, not to forget about them. I mean, again, there's all kinds of stakeholders. I think sometimes each of them have been ignorant of the others.
Gary, you were also involved in a program we did on Monday night down the street, talking about various things there, and I understand that for one of the first times we saw some tension here.
Yeah, there was a little tension. It was the International Joint Commission, and they had a town hall, town hall being open to anybody. Certainly attendees from this conference were there, but any citizen could go in and listen to presentations and ask questions. It's a good process. There were a lot of questions and a little bit of pushback on the just released Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement amendment. And here we are in Lake Erie. The biggest issue are the algae blooms. It's a real hot topic, and you can these days pick up any paper and read about it. In the released water quality agreement, the commission, or the two governments, I'm sorry, not the commission, the two governments announced that they're going to basically study the algae issue here for 2 years, and then 3 years after that, they'll make recommendations for implementation of something to do something about it. Well, that got a lot of pushback, and there were 2 or 3 questions, and they were sort of answered, but not quite. Well, I had read a newspaper clip earlier in the day where a couple of environmental groups were very upset about those timelines. So I sort of pursued the question, and it was okay, but it wasn't taken kindly. I thought that there was a bit of an overreaction, which is fine. But people, when algae blooms are constantly in the news, and then you see the governments are going to study for 2 years and then do something 3 years later, and I know it's more complex than that. That gets people's attention because they go to the beach and they look at the green algae. Now, things do happen in the interim, but boy, that seems like a long ways away.
Let's go ahead and take a look at what was going on there, what the conversation actually turned out to be. Here's a tape from the town hall meeting with the International Council on Monday.
Good evening. My name is Gary Wilson from Chicago, and I write for the Great Lakes Echo out of Michigan State University. And I was glad to hear Cam say he believed in karma this evening, so here's a little karma. The Echo reported this morning, writing about the signing of the agreement, where John Jackson from Great Lakes United and Dr. Gail Kranzenberg from Hamilton, Ontario, reported they were very frustrated with the 3 to 5 years, 3 years to assess and 5 years to implement changes related to phosphorus. And I'd like your comments on that, please.
Well, I already mentioned that those are the outside parameters. Some things will be able to, I think, reasonably be accomplished much sooner, and some things may have a hard time being achieved in that time frame. But from the IGAC's perspective, on the issues that we're particularly focused on, we hope to make a contribution. We hope that contribution will be in, we know that contribution will be in collaboration with a number of experts who are here this week and organizations. We think we already have a lot of information and that some things can go more quickly.
And just to build off of that, I just want to reiterate, work has not stopped because the agreement was signed. That work is ongoing. What the agreement does is really provide a framework that allows us to move forward that's more accessible to the public, based on common principles, that allows us to have more of a preventative approach. And as far as the Lake Erie priority, which we have about 6 months really underneath our belt, we're really hopeful that we'll be able to meet the, actually exceed those timelines, and that's just the floor, and we can always go faster, but it needs to be informed. Is that helpful, Gary?
Well, I've got a quick follow-up on that.
Okay.
And let me add to my echo that the time frames in there are outside, but also we need to rely on the authorities, Gary, not just that we have federally, but also the states, municipalities, and other jurisdictions as well. We haven't yet gotten those other authorities together. So once that happens, we'll be able to better harmonize efforts and use all the tools in the various toolbox to help us get there. But I can guarantee this, there is, we feel a whole lot of urgency on this particular issue.
I would just add that what I just reported were the words of Dr. Kranzberg and John Jackson, but I would contextualize them in that the agreement doesn't have a great track record for delivering. So therefore, I think the skepticism is justified. Thank you.
And back with Gary now from the Great Lakes Echo and with Patrick Doran of the Nature Conservancy. A little bit of reticence to answer the question there. You almost seem frustrated.
I was frustrated, and I happened to run into the one of the people who asked the original, who was quoted in the original article, and he sort of had a big guffaw about it as he was watching the thing. He just thought that there was a little bit of reticence to answer a very important question.
Patrick Doran, we hate to laugh about the idea. You were saying earlier that sometimes there's almost a us and them feel.
Yeah, I guess that's, sometimes we're all very linear thinkers, and we like to, well, we're going to do the study, and then we're going to develop the implementation plan, and then we're going to go act. It's a messy world we live in, and it can't be us versus them. It's kind of, everybody is out there, in general, moving in the same direction. And I think we have to, the way I might have answered Gary's question is, we need to have these planning efforts going on. That doesn't mean people aren't out there on the ground implementing conservation or restoration efforts every single day. Those are going on. The funding needs to be sustained. All of these things need to be really sustained over time. The science, the monitoring, the action, the planning, and it all needs to be adaptive. So, it may be frustrating, I think, to wait, but it doesn't mean people can't act now and we can't move ahead. And there are many organizations out there that are every day making stride by stride by stride.
Point you made earlier that we have all these governments that really need to work together. At the same time, the governments need to realize that the people want to be a part of it too, and there's a disconnect there to the public.
Again, I'm big on disconnects this week and making these connections. It's not just the government. We've heard lots of discussions about Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, governmental funding on both sides of the borders here, both sides of the state borders and the international borders. Our corporations need to step up to the plate. They get many resources, many values. They use our water in their products. They rely upon this water. They need to be sustainable for 100 years. They need to invest in the sustainability of those resources. People, us, we recreate. We look to those lakes every day. We buy our homes on the lakes if we can. We go there on the weekends. We go fishing. We go hunting in the lands near those lakes. We have to invest in those lakes, invest in the conservation of those areas too.
Do the readers of the Echo weigh in from time to time and say, really more needs to be done in this area, more needs to be done here, whether it's conservation, whether it's invasive species, whether it's agricultural runoff?
That's a great question, Rick, and a good observation. They do weigh in, but it's a different constituency. It's actually very refreshing. You've got hundreds of people here at this conference, but these are people who are, professionals. They work for government agencies. They work for.
They're vested.
Yeah, they're vested. But there are a group of people out there who are aligned with these issues, and but they aren't part of an organization, and they need to have a voice. And many of them are not hesitant about. They write and call occasionally if they can track me down, and they say, "Boy, you were really right on the mark with that."
We'll post your cell phone number later.
Right, yeah. Or they will tell me, "Boy, Gary, I don't know what you were thinking that particular day, but you got that one wrong." But they're out there, and they don't necessarily have the forum that the people at this conference do.
Yeah, I think that's the wonders of social media. Gary can write a column. He can have people rebut and engage in a discussion. You can be on Twitter. You can be on Facebook. And I think where that gets us is, there's a wisdom in the crowds. There is a lot of knowledge, whether it's indigenous knowledge of people, long-term associations with place. There's a lot of knowledge that we can bring together to help better inform these decisions.
Gary, you made a point 6 or 7 minutes ago about the fact that some of the things we're hearing today and yesterday are the things that we could have heard 365 days ago.
Right.
What do we need to be hearing 365 days from now that you think would advance the conversation in the direction in which it should go?
It would be, in my ideal world, and I think Patrick hit on it a little bit, there needs to be that integration. In my ideal world, the people, say, on the CARP panel would call a timeout and get together and say, let's stop going to conferences where we all get our notes out and change the comma here and there and repeat the same points and quote the same studies and try to find some common ground. That would be refreshing. Now, if they get there or not, that'll be what it is. But right now, it's a little bit like our executive branch and our Congress. They both both know what they want to do, but they aren't communicating very well together. That would be a fantastic outcome. And then if they couldn't agree, they don't agree.
You brought up the ugly idea of politics right now. I'll give Patrick Doran the last thought here. Is there a big sea change in Washington paying attention to the states rather than the states having to take orders from Washington?
I think so. I think, you know, this is a resource, again, in our backyard and the big collective hour here. This is an area with tens of millions of people that rely upon this resource. They will be listened to. And I think if we can get up in a year from now and there's representatives from every one of those states and you have a couple of the major corporations and they get up and say, this is what we're doing, and we all agree, and everybody on this panel, everybody standing here together is going with that same message about how we're going to approach an aquatic invasive species problem or a high-level nutrient problem or the interactions between those problems, then I think that would be exciting next year.
It would be.
Patrick Doran, Gary Wilson, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Rick.